Hello everyone. Today we're going to find out if we can place flowers here. So we have a flower bed, and the rule is you cannot place flowers next to each other. So 1 means it's taken, 0 means it's open, and we want to return true if we can place this many flowers. So we have 1 flower. And it's true, there's a place where we can do that. And so we want to compare the number of flowers that we're able to place within. So let's have a variable to count the number of flowers we're actually able to place. We're going to iterate over the flower bed and then decide for each index if its neighbor is a 0, or if it itself is a 0, are its neighbors zeros? And if it is the first index, is its neighbor, if it's not, its neighbor would not be a 0, is its neighbor is I 0? So in that case, in the case of I being 0, we would say, okay, well, if it's the first one, and then its neighbor to the right of it's 0, and this is I is 0, then, and if this was 0, we would be able to place a flower there. I know that's convoluted. So let's just iterate int I equals 0, I is less than flower bed dot length I plus plus. So we only do this if the current position is 0. So if flower bed I is equal to 0, then we will do the logic. So we're going to have 2 variables, previous and next, and these are going to be the values. So we're going to check the values here. But before I do that, I want to go a little bit further. I want to say if previous equals 0 and next equals 0, then we can assign that index to be 1 and increment the count. And then we want to return true if we counted greater than or equal to n. So the number of, if we're able to count 1, that's great. If we're able to plant more than 1, that's equally great. And anything less than or equal is would return true. So this is going to return a Boolean value. And so now we just want to determine the value of the previous and the next. So like we said, if I is equal to 1, so if I is equal to if 0, if we're at the first position, and I is 0, so are we at the first position? Then please pretend the previous pointer is pointing to 0. Else, let's pretend it's 1. So the other situation is now we're in bounds. So is flower bed I minus 1 actually 0? So this first one is in the case that we're at the first position. So let's pretend the thing to the left of the first position is a 0. This one is actually checking. In either way, if we return true, it means it's 0, and we do a 0. Otherwise, if it's not either of those cases, we do a 1. And what's the opposite of this? The opposite of this is if I is at the last position. So flower bed.length. In that case, let's pretend it's 0, otherwise 1. And then the actual thing we're checking for is the thing to the left, or is the thing to the right of the current position equal to 0. In that case, if either of these are true, then in fact it's 0. Otherwise, it's a 1. And so yeah, we can place flowers there. The length is greater than the actual index, because index starts from 0. Okay.